This is a stained glass panel that I made of Zagreus from the video game Hades. And this was a commission, and they wanted to see Zagreus holding the Dionysus boon. I found this nice pink glass that I think is pretty accurate to that character. They also grew up around wineries and wanted to have kind of a wine-themed background that also I think ties nicely to Dionysus and reminds me a little bit of the Persephone's garden. So I immediately thought of this grapevine trellis behind him, and I think that nicely frames the character, but it also allows me to organically solve a lot of glass specific problems. With this character, when you're thinking about this, there's a lot of things you have to take into consideration, like these points in his hair. There's a lot of spikes here. And if I were to just leave this as a solid piece of glass behind him, it would inevitably break. Glass doesn't like having these points just sort of poke into it. So over time, you would have fractures run from the tips of these points. So you need to break up those points, and having these grapevines allowed me to do that organically. You can see where this touches on that point, and then it curves around, and then it touches on that point. I've got this little thin vine that catches the bottom of this bunch of grapes and also connects to the tip of that leaf. But I think it does so in a way that's pretty organic and stays pretty true to the character. Initially, I had thought that I wanted to do clear glass behind Zagreus and behind the grapevine. I wanted to do like a watery, textured glass, but this is actually set in an LED light box that I built so that it can just be hung on a wall. It doesn't actually have to be in a window. And because of that, there's this diffusion paper that you have to use to kind of spread the light around and diffuse it. And if I were to stick with that transparent glass, what ends up happening is it looks really flat because you have the paper right up against the back of the glass, and you kind of lose any textural quality, that watery effect that I was going for. It just wasn't working. So I found a couple of things that I really liked. Number one is this sort of marble type of glass that I think kind of is a tie back to classical Greek design, which of course Zagreus ties into that mythology. But I also wanted to add some more depth, and I found this green glass that I think worked out really well. It's a combination of semi-transparent green with a little bit of yellow and amber, and I think it gives a nice depth, because again, with that diffusion paper behind the glass, it kind of makes things look flat, but this glass itself has depth and texture to it. I think it really helps to make the piece a little more dynamic. Obviously, there's a lot of paint work that went into this. Now, to be clear, the only paints that I used were mostly black. So here in the skulls and here in the shading. And then I used a little bit of brown to do some of the shading in his skin. But other than that, all of these bright colors that you see are the inherent colors of the glass itself. I didn't paint any of the colors in. And the paint that I used is a type of paint called vitreous paint. It's made from glass that has been finely ground into a powder, and then it's mixed with a liquid and then applied as paint. And then any pieces that are painted, for example, these dog skulls, they're then fired in a kiln so that the surface of the glass melts along with that glass paint, and it fuses together permanently. This is the same technique that's used in like cathedrals and other places of worship where you see faces and whatnot that have been painted on but are permanent. And this is a really high contrast piece, so there was quite a bit of that black vitreous paint that was used. I think it came out really well. This Dionysus boon, for example, is actually one piece of glass. And then I used that vitreous paint to paint in that contrast. This green eye, I think, is probably the smallest piece I've ever made out of glass. It was kind of tricky to cut a piece that small to fit, but I think it really works. It really has a lot of impact. It kind of draws your eye to the character. And here it is with the lights off. The other thing that was important to me is I wanted this to look good even when it's not backlit. So I had to take that into consideration as I was picking out the glass. If I turn off the backlight, I still think it's a nice piece of art. You still get that contrast. You can still see the shading. You still get some of the dynamic texture of the glass itself. So I still think it's a nice piece of art, even when it's not backlit. It's only enhanced then by the LED. If you'd like to commission a piece, message us through our Etsy store at the web address in the description below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and visit us at our website at jupiter-glass.com.